Hello and welcome to the Constitution Study. My name is Paul Engel, and we are here to return the Constitution to we the people. If you're a new listener, that means taking the words of the Constitution and taking it out of the hands of judges and returning it to its rightful owners. The Constitution starts out with we the people in the preamble. Let's return the Constitution to us, to our control, to our understanding. If you are a returning listener, I am so glad you're here. We've been seeing good numbers on downloads for the podcast. It's because people like you who are reading and studying the Constitution, coming back to learn more so that we can retain our freedoms, so that we can assert and defend them, because they are definitely being challenged. They are being infringed upon, and we need to understand how those rights were protected, supposed to be protected by the people based on the process of the Constitution, and how we can use those laws, the law of the Constitution, to return those rights to us. Today we have an interesting topic, seeing as the Supreme Court recently adjourned for the year, and as usual, issued a bunch of decisions right at the end on some very interesting topics. We've been going through some of those. Today, I'm taking on South Dakota versus Wayfair, Inc. You may have heard about it. You may not have heard the name. This is where the Supreme Court has determined, their decision is that states can now collect sales tax from businesses outside of their borders. Now, after reading the court's opinion, I want to take some time and discuss, well, the good, the bad, and the pretty ugly that I found inside. So, first thing I want to tell you to do is, if I were you, I would forget everything you're hearing from the talking heads. I have heard more foolishness about this particular decision. Does it mean, is it a blow for one group? Is it a blow for another group? Looking at what was actually found, what the decision actually was. See, the court found that their own physical presence rule, what they had established 50 years ago in a case called Quill Corp versus North Dakota, they said it was unsound. Okay, and what was the reason why? Well, the court said that, quote, state regulations may not discriminate against interstate commerce, and states may not impose undue burdens on interstate commerce, close quote. Okay, the Constitution gives Congress the ability to regulate interstate commerce. So the court is right. States may not discriminate or unduly burden interstate commerce. However, they go on to say that for a sales tax to be valid, it must, one, apply to activity with a substantial nexus with the taxing state. Two, be fairly apportioned. Three, do not discriminate against interstate commerce. And four, are fairly related to the services the state provides. See, state and local taxing authorities have been complaining about the physical presence rule probably since it was first brought to bear in the decision National Bellas Hess versus Department of Revenue. Now, I've even had talks with my own state representatives about it. However, when I look into the details, I really kind of wonder what people are all upset about. See, according to the Supreme Court, state regulations may not impose undue burdens on interstate commerce. And I agree, that was why this was put into the Constitution, that the Congress controls interstate commerce, was to avoid states putting taxes, duties, imposts on material shipped between those states. What I find curious, though, is if the court does not believe that having to understand and follow the laws, not to mention report and remit to 10,000 or more different taxing authorities, is an undue burden on interstate commerce, what is? I mean, think about it. If you're a business person, now suddenly you not only have to collect sales tax for your local state or your local county, but for every state, county, and municipal government that has their own sales tax. How in heaven's name are you supposed to keep track of that? I mean, let's face it. Everyone complains about Amazon and these big retailers saying, "Oh, see, they're costing us so much money." Well, let's face it. Amazon, Walmart, all of these big retailers everyone complains about, they mostly have a physical presence in almost all the states. Therefore, they are already required to collect sales tax in that state. I live in the state of Tennessee. Whenever I place an order on Amazon, they collect my Tennessee state sales tax. They're required to by law. How does saying, well, now everybody else has to do it, how does that impact the big box stores, the big online retailers? I mean, to me, it doesn't make any sense. Really what this is going to do is this is going to destroy small business. The small shops that have very few outlets, maybe even running out of your garage. The startup, the idea that you have that says, hey, I'm going to start this business, but now if you sell anything and you want to do it across state lines, you have to collect and remit sales tax just about everywhere. It's insane. Now, South Dakota does put a limit. They do say that there must be $100,000 or 200 transactions before they have to an entity has to collect taxes. However, the court has not determined that that is the floor for the quote-unquote substantial nexus with the taxing state. See, okay, if South Dakota says it's 100,000, why can't North Dakota say 50,000? Why can't Tennessee say 10,000? Why can't they just say everything? There's no limit put on it. And that, to me, is an undue burden on interstate commerce. Now, if I want to sell something through across the state, I have to keep track of all the taxing authorities that I might do business with. And that's just a nightmare. See, while the residents of South Dakota they're fairly related to the services the state provides, they're not the ones directly bearing the substantial burden. See, me as the business owner, I'm the one that's being asked to collect the sales tax. I'm the one that's going to have to go through the extra time and expense of somehow tracking all of this. I'm either going to have to hire somebody or I'm going to have to sign a firm up that's going to keep track of all this for me. I'm obviously going to have to maintain my websites with all the changes and all the data. And I'm not getting any of the services that the state offers unless I'm selling in Tennessee, which I already have to collect sales tax on. So even that scenario of being fairly related doesn't really jive with reality. Now let's take a look at some of the numbers, because when I did this for Tennessee, it was interesting. But I'll use South Dakota because that's the case that was here. The state of South Dakota claims they lose between $48 million and $58 million a year to out-of-state sales that do not collect taxes. Although I haven't really seen any data to support it, we'll use those numbers. Now, it took a grand total of about 10 minutes of research for me to find out that in 2017, South Dakota had taxable sales of $21,120,502,661. Now, at a state sales tax rate of 4%, you do the math, you come up with the fact that South Dakota collected $844,820,106.44 in sales tax. Now, if South Dakota's estimate of quote-unquote lost sales tax revenue is between 5.7 and 6.8% of their total receipts. Now, I admit that a 7% cut in revenue is not insignificant, but I wonder if all of this is really worth it. See, what will the economic impact on small business be in South Dakota when other states with sales taxes start requiring them to file tax returns as well? What happens when New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Tennessee, all the other states that have sales taxes start saying, hey, South Dakota small businesses, you have to report and remit to us as well? And that doesn't even begin to mention what's it going to cost South Dakota to process all these additional returns from all over the country. Not to mention what they're going to spend to collect on people who do not report taxable income. See, what really disturbs me is while the court seems very concerned with the advantage that out-of-state retailers may have within the state of South Dakota, they take no idea of what this impact of this ruling would be, this decision, sorry, not a ruling, a decision. What is the impact of this decision? And let's even start with whether or not it's even constitutional. See, the question that's never asked, much less answered, is what authority does one state have to enforce laws outside of their jurisdiction? What right does South Dakota have to enforce laws anywhere outside of South Dakota? See, the court claims that the physical presence rule helps customers evade a lawful tax. Though it doesn't really show how shifting the burden of executing state law to citizens of other states is constitutional at all. It is current law. If you purchase something from an out-of-state retailer that does not collect sales tax, you are required to remit that tax yourself. It appears to me that the problem is not that South Dakota, and in fact every other state with a sales tax, have not been able to collect these taxes from their own citizens. That seems to be the problem. They want to place that burden on someone else. This seems to be more about punishing small internet businesses than collecting the 6 to 7% additional sales tax revenue that South Dakota claims it's losing. How long before the states start asking the federal government to collect out-of-state sales taxes for them? Because that, my friends, is something the federal government is prohibited by the 10th Amendment. They are not allowed to. But then again, nowadays, people pay very little attention to the Constitution and what it actually says. Now, reading through, I looked at the dissents. Justice Thomas and Gorsuch wrote their concurring opinions. Sorry, before I get to dissents, they wrote their concurring opinions, claiming that the physical presence rule in Bellas, Hess, and Quill, quote, can no longer be rationally justified, close quote. On the contrary, I believe I've shown that the removal of that law is what cannot be justified. Justice Gorsuch believes the physical presence rule should be abolished, but believes that since the Constitution gives the power to regulate interstate commerce to Congress, by the way, it's Article 1, Section 8, Paragraph 3, therefore Congress should be the one to change interstate tax law. Unfortunately, Mr. Gorsuch, I do not see how concurring with an opinion you believe violates the Constitution is a proper exercise of your judicial power. In fact, Chief Justice Roberts, along with Justices Breyer, Sotomayor, and Kagan, dissented from the opinion for this very reason. Unfortunately, I see this as yet another example of the federal government protecting the power of government over the rights of the people, violating both the Constitution's separation of powers and their oaths of office in the process. See, until we hold our elected officials accountable to do the job of holding the other branches of government accountable for their actions, our rights will be further diluted by government at all levels, federal, state, county, and local. All of this in their quest for power and money. Because if you look at this, all they're worried about is their 6 to 7%, not is what they're trying to do just or right. So I hope you found that interesting. I hope it made you think a little bit. I hope it made you look at the Constitution and see if what I am saying is true. Our rights are under attack. Our Constitution is being ignored. And especially with an election coming up, it seems like very few people are using the levers of power the Constitution has given we the people to hold our elected officials accountable. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you will head to the website, constitutionstudy.com. You can read the blog post related to this. You can get copies of the podcast. You can also listen to the podcast on Apple Podcasts. You can subscribe there. On the website, you can sign up for the mailing list. You still new mailing list members will get a free copy of my essay, How the 16th and 17th Amendments Destroyed the Republic. You can also support the Constitution Study on Patreon. Help keep this up and running. Help keep this moving. Help keep this agenda moving. Help keep this movement alive by supporting me. Whether or not it's financially through Patreon or just by going to the website and commenting and asking questions. I'm really looking for questions. They feed a lot of my ideas for the blog posts and the podcast. So I really hope you'll head to the website. Again, that's constitutionstudy.com, that you will ask a question, that you'll sign up for the mailing list. It is free. I don't send out lots of spam. about what's going on. It's mostly events that are coming up. And if you can and you think it's worth it, I hope you'll head to Patreon and support me there as well. Most of all, I hope you'll come back, because I hope you'll want to learn and listen what our Constitution says, so we know what our rights are and be able to assert and defend them. So I hope to see you again the next time on the Constitution Study. Thank you.